If you are a forward thinker, I believe that you can be able to try and resonate around any topic so long as it will help you prove a point. And in the previous episode, I promised you to discuss a very original topic so that it will help us understand another very powerful perspective when it comes to the development of the African continent. Well, this is what I'm about to do in this second episode of 2025. Sit tight and let's enjoy together. Welcome to your favorite development and political podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African Talks. I'm S.I.K.A. and I'm the main host and the producer of this amazing podcast. If you're new here and you just discovered the podcast, well, it's all about Africa's development. Here, I try and discuss the most relevant topic, so long as they're related to economic development, climate change, and politics. So, if you're new here, all you have to do is to click on the subscribe button and activate the ring bell so that you will not miss out on any of the very interesting topic. If you are also a person who enjoys multitasking, I recommend you to also download the podcast straight on Spotify or Apple Podcast, depending on which podcast application you're using and enjoying. And lately, you can also follow the podcast on, various social network. All you have to do is just to type SIKA Talks and you definitely find the official page. As I was saying in the introduction, when you are a forward thinker, you can literally resonate around any topic and try and prove a point or make a point. And today I usually don't do that, but when listening to this particular interview on CNN, I was very appalled and I was flabbergasted. This interview literally blew my mind because what I just heard, and especially what I heard coming from that particular individual, was very surprising. And I decided to actually use one of the keywords used during the interview because, in my opinion, it was very strong and it was very relevant because it somehow matches with how I personally view the entire economic condition in Africa. And of course it will make sense. Who am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about an African actor, born in Benin, who actually acquired the American citizenship, and he actually played in blockbusters. Blockbusters are some of the biggest success, in Hollywood. And I can actually think of movies like Gladiator, Blood Diamond, Amistad, and some DC and Marvel franchise, where he also featured. And obviously, if you've been following the news lately, I'm talking about, the one and only Djimon Hounsou. And I'm going to actually share a snapshot of his interview, on CNN, and you will actually pay attention to the word he used and the idea, that he was sharing.
They just didn't feel like I was an actor for whom we should pay any respect to. So this conceptual idea of diversity and all that, it still has a long way to go. Systemic racism don't change like that anytime soon. I mean, I'm still struggling trying to make a living.
After 30 years in this business?
After, 30 years, let's say maybe the first 10 years was really trying to, sort of acclimate myself to the industry.
And establish yourself.
Establish myself. I've been in this business and making films now over 2 decades, and still, with 2 Oscar nominations, been in many big blockbuster films, and yet I'm still struggling financially to make a living. I'm definitely underpaid.
Growing up, You're one of the first big black actors I saw in big budget films. So it's mind-boggling to me.
But that's a sign for you that systemic racism is not something that you can deal with lightly. It's so deep inserted in so many things that we do across the board, and you don't overcome it. You just have to you have to cope with it and survive the best way you can.
What do you
Now, from the clip you just watched, it's obvious that there are various shocking elements. But for the sake of this podcast and for the sake of this episode, I am going to focus on what I consider relevant, in terms of development and in terms of economic progress for the African continent. And I'm going to actually focus on what's called systemic racism. Yeah. Well, my friend, systemic racism is a very powerful, economic structure, economic system. Why do I call it an economic system? Because it's a system that is actually set in place to promote, to prioritize, to protect, and to favor a specific group of people based on their race, based on their birthright, based on their blood, based on their origin, based on anything in addition to their skills. And sometimes it's even based on anything except their skills. So if I were to reformulate, actually, I'd say systemic racism first promotes some kind of advantages and benefit solely or primarily based on nothing objective. It's mostly, based on fostering, advancement, fostering benefit, economic benefit, social advantage, solely based on subjective elements such as race, origin, birthright, birth condition, and stuff like that. But what's very interesting with systemic racism, you should also not construe it only from the position or from the opinion that it does only exist in Western society, or it's just created, or it's been created by white people. No, this is an assumption that I want you to deconstruct. Systemic racism does exist almost everywhere. You go to America, you go to Europe, you go to Asia, you'll definitely face systemic racism. You'll face systemic racism in almost every industry, and especially in niche industries that do not want to be open, to a certain level, and also to industries that do not wish to be penetrated, up to a certain level. So this is a very strong and very powerful system. And as you probably understand by now, the key goal of this system is to welcome people, to welcome individuals up to a certain level. So let me try and present you a very simple structure. In every economic structure, and I'm talking from a very basic point, I'm not going to get very technical here, but when creating an economic system and when creating an economic structure, within an economic system, you have something that is called a value chain. And within a value chain, you have specific components. And every component is actually critical to making sure that whatever economic system that you are creating is going to thrive and is going to actually meet with growth and, progress, and will also lead to some profits, definitely, because there's no charity when it comes to economy. Economy always seeks benefit and profit. So when setting in place that value chain, within every component of the value chain, you have elements, and every element, belongs to a specific position. And at the bottom of the pyramid, you have those you call contributors. Contributors are people you need to make sure that, whatever component of your value chain is going to be dynamic, is going to be able to perform. So you definitely need contributors. And contributors this is like the entry door, the entry level. And at the entry level, you'll notice that within every systemic racism, there's little filter applied there. And why is that? Well, the answer is pretty simple. You want to welcome as much people as possible in order to make sure that the demand for employment, the demand for job, like far outreach the offer that is available. Therefore, you as an employer, you as the owner of that systemic racism, you are going to be able to save on, like salary cost, because you're now going to be able to play on that argument and offer like, the minimum level salary to anybody, at least at a contributor level. And after the contributor level, now you move to the partner level. The partner level gives you a bit of power. It gives you more benefit. It gives you more right. It also improves your financial status. After the partner level, you reach the owner level. The owner level, you can divide it in two categories. You have the decision makers and you have, the management position, the ruling position, where you can actually like take part in the day-to-day management of the company and stuff like that. But I don't even like, breaking it down into two categories. So I'm going to scratch that. I want you to keep in mind that within a particular element, of the value chain, a particular component of the value chain, inside that component, you have the contributor level, you have the partner level, you have the owner level, and then you have the decision maker level. So overall, systemic racism does have this particular structure where you are welcome within a particular industry. And your welcoming is no longer a problem so long as you are happy with being a contributor. If you are happy with being a contributor, it means that you are happy, to keep providing the industry, like to grow, to be dynamic. But in terms of reaping the benefit, in terms of like reaping the financial benefit and the non-financial benefit, you are actually like limited to reaching a certain level, which is fine for some people. And for some people, it's not. And this is something Djimon was actually trying to explain. And this is what I found very shocking. Because you will also try and understand that for a system that is inherently unfair to people, you may believe that when you succeed at actually like gaining some status, the system might become more flexible towards you. What I'm trying to say here is that for a critical thinker, or for a person, for an outsider, for someone who's not evolving in a particular industry where there is actually systemic racism, or where there is a claim of having systemic racism, you may believe that even though the system is not fair, but the unfairness of the system may not apply to some high-level individuals. So you may tend to believe that if you make it in life, if you work hard, and if you actually gain a certain level of recognition from your peers and from, people outside your industries, you get some sort of protection against any unfairness, against any discrimination. And that is where, again, you're wrong. Because systemic racism, like I said, is not built, like primarily on objective, criteria. It's built on very subjective criteria, such as your birthright, your birth origin, your skin race, your skin color, and stuff like that. And the reason why I call them very subjective is because you have no power over them. Look, Djimon Hounsou did not choose to be born in Benin. Djimon Hounsou did not choose to be born as an African or as a black person. President Xi Jinping did not choose to be born as a Chinese. Donald Trump did not choose to be born as an American, a white American. You have no control over it. So when implementing, a system that is literally, like implicitly saying that based on criteria such as race, birthright, birth origin, you are going to make it further and farther than other people, you are not basing your system on objective criteria. Objective criteria are criteria that people can actually achieve, criteria that people can actually meet, save that they get access to some level of training or some level of opportunities. But if they don't, it's going to be difficult to them, to actually reach those objective criteria. Therefore, it's going to also be difficult for them to gain the benefit that they expect to gain. So systemic racism does not promote that kind of effective, assessment. Now, what I want you to keep in mind, I'm just going to stop there because I don't want to sound too technical. I don't want to lose you also. So now you understand how dangerous systemic racism is. And you also understand that, to be fair, systemic racism is not just the property of the Western world. It is a system, that is actually being applicable almost everywhere, because people and human race and mankind tend to, prioritize, those who assimilate to themselves. So, I don't know if it's good or I don't know if it's wrong, but it's a fact. But now, coming back to the African continent, what I want you to keep in mind is that I want you to replace Djimon Hounsou with the African continent. And I also want you to replace Hollywood with the international market. I also want you to replace the Oscar award ceremony with the international community. So what will we have? Now we are going to have Africa, as Djimon Hounsou, saying on CNN that despite the fact that, they've been, performing relatively well. They've been working hard for the past 60 years. Africa has been, fighting, so much, to improve the day-to-day life of Africans, the day-to-day economic condition of African and the business environment. They're still struggling financially. The African continent is still struggling financially. And according to the analysis of the African continent, the reason is because of the existence of systemic racism. Do you get my point? Now, what's going to happen? What's happened usually is that when faced with the threat of systemic racism, the answer is generally providing a more inclusionary environment and providing also more diversity. In other terms, you have a system that is clearly based on subjective element. And on the other hand, you have a continent, that has not been able to reach its optimal level when it comes to economic performance and development objective. Because what they do is that they are trying to actually adapt themselves within a system that is actually created from the beginning, not to promote, to protect, to prioritize, and to favor their interests. And the international answer to that kind of unfairness, is that, we are going to ask those who own the systemic racism environment to actually open the door and welcome more people and more people from diverse origin. Well, there's nothing wrong with that kind of answer. There's nothing wrong with that kind of solution. I think it's a beginning. But again, I want you to keep in mind that if you are Africa and if you've been striving for the past 60 years to actually reach a level where your economy will actually be able to match your potential, and you're still struggling like Djimon Hounsou stressed, do you think that the answer lies in inclusion and diversity? Do you think that it really makes sense for you to actually fight to be included, within a system that has not been working for you for the past 60 years? This is something, I think it's worth giving a thought, a serious thought, because like I said, it's a structural system that is not created to protect your interests. So the issue at stake here is to understand that when people are complaining about systemic racism, people like Djimon Hounsou and IE, when an entire continent like the African continent, is complaining about systemic racism based on the fact that the international market is not structured in a way that it will acknowledge all the effort, on the African end. It will also not acknowledge, the economic potential of the continent, but it will continue, to protect and to promote its own interest. The answer is not just towards having inclusion and diversity, because people are not just demanding to want in. People are not simply demanding to gain access, but people are also, in addition to gaining access, also wanting to be able to earn whatever they deserve. I.e., if you are the African continent and if you are the most, richest continent in the world in terms of natural resources, if you also have one of the most dynamic market in terms of like ROI, return on interest, return on investment, when investing in Africa right now, you're looking at over 10% return as compared to developed economy where, like the return rate is actually lower, and it's lower because they've already reached like a level of progress and development where it's very difficult to bring innovation and to have higher impact as compared to a completely like nascent market, a nascent environment and a growing environment such as the African environment where you literally have to create anything. You have to create everything, and you can literally see a proper and clear impact, when it comes to your innovation and the solution that you're offering. So what I'm saying here is that this systemic, racism structure does not just exist at an individual level, at also a continental level. It does exist, and unfortunately, many of our African leaders are trying to follow and are continuing to follow the route of inclusion and diversity instead of following another route that will actually, equip the continent to actually also create its own, economic system, its proper economic system, same as China did, same as, like the UAE and Qatar and other countries did. It is only when the African continent will understand that the answer, to systemic racism is not solely inclusion and diversity, but one of the most efficient answer is also by being able to create a proper and a domestic economic system that's going to protect, promote, prioritize, and favor intertrade, that's going to favor, like internal growth of SMEs, small businesses, informal market, informal sector, a structure, an economic structure that is going to make sure that whatever business that is created in Africa will first serve, African consumers, will address the need of African consumers, and will make sure that, African owners, African decision makers, and African partners are also, earning a proper amount of recognition and financial interest. Only when that is going to be possible and available, you will automatically see that the inclusion that you are so much seeking will actually take place automatically. And to conclude, I want you to think of the current example of, the American market versus the Chinese market. Whatever you find in America, whenever the Chinese cannot create, whenever they cannot compete, whenever they cannot do a better version, what they do, they replicate. They do not fight, for inclusion in America. They do not fight for inclusion within the American market, although the American market is very important, to any entrepreneur in the world. It's very important to penetrate the American market. But rest assured that even if you don't have, or even if you cannot penetrate the American market, there are still some other viable alternatives that are available out there, i.e. you can rely on your domestic market. You can rely on your regional market, the sub-regional market, and every other alternative market available out there. So when I was listening to this interview, and I am very sorry for Djimon Hounsou, and I do hope that the situation is going to improve because I personally believe that it deserves it. But I think from a development perspective, I could not stop and put the African continent within the same context. A context where the African continent is thriving, to actually reach economic growth and development. But unfortunately, it is playing within a system that is not constructed to actually promote, protect, and favor, its regional interest and also its national interest. So let me know what you think of this episode and this analysis. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening to SIKA Talks, the only podcast where strong realities meet powerful perspectives. À bientôt.